This episode is brought to you by Temptations Cat Treats. Your cat will come running for the perfectly irresistible Temptations Creamy Puree and Temptations Lickable Spoon Cat Treats. The best time to feed lickable cat treats to your cat is anytime. Feed by hand for a playful moment, in a bowl for a creamy treat, or as a topper to make mealtime fun. Visit temptationstreats.com to learn more.
Welcome back to the Epic Universal Podcast. I'm entertainment writer Jim Hill, and this is the podcast where we cover the latest Universal news, rumors, and history. And as always, I'm joined by Eric Hersey, who, thank the Lord, lives in a house that's high up on a hill because Wheeling had some interesting weather this past weekend. Is that correct?
Yeah, Jim, that's never good news when Wheeling hits the national news. And that's what happened this Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. We had, honestly, flash floods. So if anybody's been paying attention to any of the national news, you'll get a little West Virginia. It seemed like Wheeling was hit real hard. Honestly, 5 minutes away. They completely wiped out a few neighborhoods. Thankfully, we were indoors and did not have any damage. But there are some, friends and friends of family that were hit pretty hard here. So we're lucky.
Yeah. That said, that it did impact at least one member of the Hersey family, Miles, who would be tonight at a baseball game. Right? His field was flooded. Right?
Oh, it's more than flooded, Jim. It basically, so at the field had a little barn where they kept their lawnmower, and there was a retaining wall and so forth gone. We drove by it yesterday. Oof. It was the saddest I felt because this is what we've been doing every single Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday is packing up, going to this field. So Miles was pretty depressed off that, but don't worry, there are other fields, and it sounds like the game is on for tomorrow.
Okay, well, good to hear. And speaking of the game, and in recognition of Miles's loss, we're going to do a baseball-related feature later on in today's show, one that actually shines a spotlight on one of the more famous comedy teams, the ones that work for Universal. But we'll get to that later on in today's show. But first is the news, and before we get to that, we need to acknowledge our sponsor, which is Be Our Guest Vacations. And are you planning your next adventure? Let the experts at Be Our Guest Vacations take care of the details. As a platinum-level earmarked travel agency, they provide top-tier concierge service for trips to Universal Orlando, Universal Hollywood, the Disney parks, cruises, and more. Get started today at beourguestvacations.com and be sure to mention that the Epic Universal Podcast sent you. All right, Eric, you spent the earlier part of the day out digging up Universal-related news. What'd you find out?
Well, I think at the top of most news segments and everywhere is how the box office success of How to Train Your Dragon for this weekend was pretty significant. Did it hit estimates, Jim? Are the people at Universal happy with this? You are much more the movie buff than I am.
Yeah, overall they are. They were touting the fact that the $83.7 million that this film pulled in is actually a franchise best. And remember, we've had How to Train Your Dragon films since 2010. The interesting thing is that Universal was actually hoping this one would overperform domestically, and it didn't. It did really well, but it didn't crack the 100 million domestic. Though, oddly enough, as of yesterday, this Dean Dubois film sits at 93 million, and obviously, as this podcast posts on Friday, June 20th, this thing will be well north of $100 million in North America. It's also blown past worldwide gross of over 200 million. So they are very happy, especially since, let's remember, they've already announced that How to Train Your Dragon 2 is coming to a theater near you in 2027, right?
Right. That's what, that was the thing that, they make an announcement like that. They did see, they had early indicators proving that this was going to be pretty decent. The Super Bowl teaser, I think, received 370 million global views.
Oh, yeah.
And then I think all of the trailers combined almost hit 750 million total views. So there was strong indications, which is funny in this day and age, as you look at the YouTube numbers to find out what you think's gonna, the expectations of what the movie does. So I think it did well. Do you think something like, what is Elio coming out? Do you think that's going to cause some issues there? Or Lilo and Stitch going to have a resurgence?
The 1-2 punch of Elio arriving in the marketplace and the fact that Lilo and Stitch is as strong as it is a little bit of a drag on How to Train Your Dragon. But folks I've chatted with at Universal are like, look, at the end of the summer, we're going to be very, very happy here.
Right.
And given the weird part of it is that it's actually that they believe helping to boost interest in an Epic Universe, which of course has an Isla Burke land. As far as Universal is concerned, this is all good. This is all very, very good.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that the 75-minute wait to meet Toothless is probably going to get longer and longer.
Oh, no.
As time goes by.
Absolutely.
Did you see, though, Jim, I pulled some stuff up here. Did you see 41% of this year's box office revenue has all been PG-rated family films?
Interesting.
It's like we're all and I thought, as a marketer myself, I thought this was genius. I can't believe I didn't pick up on it. Did you realize that they released this movie, what I would say a father-son, thematic movie, Father's Day weekend? Did you catch that? Or I completely didn't see that.
That's genius. Holy cow.
Right.
Hiccup and his dad. That's clever. Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So I'll give them props for that. But
okay.
Yeah, I think the people over in Hollywood are definitely happy with the and hopefully happy for the next couple of weeks. Hopefully they continue to grow, and this is another box office winner for them.
Oh yeah, and not to overstate the obvious, but if we dip out to Universal Hollywood, the theme park out there, I don't know if you saw the thing that popped up on social media. They're already they've got a thing going on inside of that park to promote Jurassic World Rebirth. They've got a dinosaur baby encounter down at...
Oh, I did see that. Yeah.
Somebody carrying, I think it's called an aqualypse around in effectively a Snuggie. It's like, come see the tiny baby dinosaur and ignore the mama that's going to bite your head off.
No, I think they're doing good with synergy there for certain.
That they are. Though, that said, speaking of Universal Studios Hollywood, the theme park out there, you came across some information in regard to, the big coaster for next year, Fast and Furious Hollywood Drift.
Yeah, they released the actual the coaster, the ride vehicle. Did you see that they released it during the Universal Mega Movie Summer, so they just launched that, in which it's their little festival kind of summer reason to go for the locals to go, but they actually have they released, you could actually kind of sit and get a photo op with the actual vehicle. It's a Dodge Charger inspired lead car. So that's basically, there's 4 cars, and then they had a little trailer YouTube video that you could watch, and it was maybe 45-second long, and just graphics, basically simulations there. But did you get a chance to look at any of that?
I did, and I got to chat with veteran Imagineer Jim Schul, who remembers the guy who helped deliver Rock and Roller Coaster with its own stretch vehicle for Disney back in '99, and Jim had high praise for what they've done with the ride vehicles over there. And some of the stats here are crazy. So 72 miles an hour, seriously? Well,
and the thing is, they spin too, Jim. So imagine going on a teacup at 72 miles per hour.
Okay.
No, they say this spins almost 360 degrees. And they did show on the simulation video, you could actually see kind of like the real drifting, because they're trying to make it as if you were drifting in a car. And I can't say, Jim, was the last time you actually drifted in one of your vehicles? Has it been a while?
Actually, the last time I drifted off to sleep in the car and wound up in a snowdrift. No, I'm not much of a drifter. That said, though, also have an interesting little bit of info in regard. We were talking on last week's show about a Rip Ride Rocket, and how you were saying you'd heard some interesting things about this attraction in regard to maybe it wasn't going to be Fast and Furious themed. That you pointed out, for example, what was it? The the construction wall that had all that info about the fire station for Ghostbusters on it.
Ghostbusters.
Have heard from friends at Universal something kind of interesting that, in fact, it comes out of the news here shared for Fast and Furious Hollywood Drift. It turns out that because of the physical setup in Florida, they're not going to be able to reach the speeds of Fast and Furious Hollywood Drift, the 72 miles an hour thing, which evidently is why they are now actually looking at a different IP, which where this gets interesting, Eric, is not Ghostbusters, but perhaps Back to the Future.
Oh, geez. Well, I mean, look at the success of Back to the Future in Hollywood at the Fan Fest. I mean, people were just raving about that.
Oh, yeah.
And I could see that. It is interesting, though. There is a slight nod to Back to the Future on the back of Stardust Racers with the did you see that the flux capacitor logo is on the back of that? And that there's some cast members would go on stories about how they had a weird man with, crazy gray hair.
Wow. No, I hadn't heard that.
I don't think it's officially part of the lore, but there is a nod to Back to the Future there, and that's a fast coaster.
Wow.
But that would be very interesting.
That would.
So I think we just keep an eye on it. But I will tell you, over in Hollywood, they look like they have a winner. It looks to be the EVP over there, Scott Strobel, said it's a game changer.
Yeah. I mean, I just from what it's going to do, I mean, think about it. It straddles basically the hillside between the upper and the lower lot, coupled with this noise reduction tech. So you're going to get a thrill ride that is actually something neighbors can live with.
Right.
That's kind of huge.
That's definitely definitely one that's worth. I mean, it's going to. When does it come out? Do you know?
Well, what we're hearing is spring of 2026.
Okay.
And remember that takes us from March right up until June. But I would imagine they'd be looking to get this thing up and running as quickly as possible. What's fascinating about this is that supposedly there is some work being done on the lower lot that will soon show what else Universal has in store for guests as we go into 28, 29, 30. That there could be some stuff of size popping up down there next to Transformers and Jurassic World and, of course, Nintendo World. So hang in there. It's going to get interesting.
Yeah, and we'll be reporting it. So another thing that we're going to report is that they did announce the annual pass dates for the pass holder appreciation days and Universal Orlando annual pass holder nights. So those came out. So looks like pass holder appreciation days runs August 15th through September 30th. And you get a free magnet this year, and you also get exclusive perks, merchandise, food deals, and giveaways. And of course, the nights is set from August 15th and 16th. So these are after hours events with you get select rides, special meet and greets, and the reservations start June 26th. So you got about 6 days to get ready for that, and you have to be 18. So those were for those pass holders. Get ready and have some fun down at the parks this summer.
And do you see you and the family headed down for any of the pass holder appreciation days?
Jim, you don't even understand how hard it is for me not to book a vacation right now. I every day, Lauren was basically begging and pleading for me to go look at room rates. And I said, I will not do it. It is too tempting. I'm trying to get some stuff done around the house this summer.
Okay.
Jim, if I'm a betting man, I bet I end up in Orlando before the August comes. So we'll see. Stay tuned, everyone.
Okay. Now, though, by the time you get back down there, one would hope we just learned about a refurb that's going on in Universal Studios Florida, right?
Well, Jim, I threw this in the news because I have questions, because I thought it was when, obviously brand new to the park, a rookie. And as you're walking through, what would be the outside of Diagon Alley, what is that considered, like Britain? I mean, when you go past the night bus, it's like a weird area, right? Yeah, and so I don't even know how to describe it, but then there's this like shack that just seems out of place, and it's a bathroom, right?
Yep.
And I walked by and I was like, well, that just seems weird. And it turns out, I'm going through some of the news articles today. It's actually an old Amity Island restroom building that is a remnant from Jaws, the attraction, which was where Diagon Alley is, right?
Yes, and as Jim Schul will tell you, and Len Testa will back him up from many of his house remodels, once you build a bathroom, you never want to get rid of it. They're just too expensive to change, and more to the point, it's not like people at theme parks need fewer bathrooms these days. If anything, they need more. So it was like,
Right.
when they built Diagon Alley, it was just like, should we retheme that? It's like, it's a bathroom. Okay. And if anybody asks about the theming, we're going to say it's tied to the old Wild Wild West Theater, which at that point was the Fear Factor Theater. And, nowadays, I think the only time they actually use that space is for Halloween Horror Nights. That's where the dance troupe performs. But,
so they're getting a new roof, right?
Okay.
Which is not that really, it's not worth news in this case. But is that the last remnant of the old Jaws ride?
Well,
I mean, is there anything else there besides a couple Easter eggs in Diagon Alley?
You hit upon it exactly. There are a handful of lovingly, positioned and carefully hidden away Easter eggs that pay tribute to Jaws the ride in Diagon Alley. But yeah, this is the one that's kind of in your face, or we won't talk about what body part it's in, but you get the idea.
No, well, I'm going to explore it next time we go.
Okay.
Whether it be this summer, just because I love that nostalgia stuff, and it's just fun to think that, hey, this was part of an original land.
All true.
But speaking of essentially scary places like bathrooms, Halloween Horror Nights has they announced a new maze, right?
Yes. One that ties to the, the Friday the 13th film franchise. This one's going to be called what? Jason Universe?
Yeah, Jason Voorhees. So basically it's a Jason, and anybody, even if you haven't seen the films, because I haven't seen the films for ages, not necessarily a huge horror film, but Jason's like one of the top dogs, the Mount Rushmore of thrillers and so forth. I think it's him, and Michael Myers and so forth. But Jason is he's going to basically get his own house, and I guess it's going to be a cabin, a rotting main lodge, and a nightmare's forest.
Yeah, and I like to remind people who listen to this podcast, I'm old. All right, and I'm so old. I remember in the summer of 1979, I had a friend who was Sean S. Cunningham's assistant on the production of the very first Friday the 13th. And my pal was telling me the story about how they only had $1.5 million to make this entire movie. So they made a deal with, and I swear to God, this is the name of the place, Camp No B Bosco. It is a Boy Scout camp. It is run by the Northern New Jersey Council of the Boy Scouts of America. Still in operation today. But by the way, Crystal Lake, not Crystal Lake. That's actually Sand Pond. But here's the thing: they had to wait till the Boy Scouts left to shoot there. So if you've ever seen the movie, the actual first movie of the Friday the 13th series, it's supposedly set as a summer camp is getting ready to open for the season. But they started shooting in September of 1979. And in fact, the giveaway is, okay, so it's June. Why are the leaves changing color to the trees? And more to the point, the poor women who had to go into the water like, I'm swimming. It's freezing. Okay. But if you actually have a desire to go to Camp Crystal Lake someday, what's worth noting is when the Boy Scouts are not in residence, and by the way, that's typically July and August, they actually do events for horror fans at Camp No B Bosco. In fact, just this past, Friday the 13th, they had an overnight. You could pay to stay and wait for Jason to come tuck you in. And later this fall, there's actually going to be another one of these events. So again, if you're a horror fan and want to see where the very first one of these, which by the way, other thing you're going to love, Eric, because again, I know you're a big Michael Eisner fan. Paramount got in a bidding war with Warner Brothers and landed the rights to release Friday the 13th to theaters back in 1980, and it was actually the third highest grossing film for that studio that year. Only Ordinary People and Popeye made more money for Paramount that year than Friday the 13th. So,
oh no, I mean, it is iconic. I like, as a kid, that is who you feared,
Mhm.
Jason. So you have an opportunity to fear him in a couple different places.
That's right.
Orlando, Hollywood, and
Hardwick, New Jersey.
That's it.
Just wondering where it is. Hardwick, New Jersey. Okay. And,
there you go.
And speaking of New Jersey, when we get back, we're going to be telling a story that largely takes place in Paterson, New Jersey, and involves that city's favorite son, one Lou Costello. And we'll get to that in a moment. But first, this.
That moment when you realize your skincare is actually working. That's Rodan & Fields, the #1 female dermatologist-founded skincare brand in the U.S. Designed by 2 dermatologists who don't just know women's skin, they know how to formulate for it. Rodan & Fields, love what you see. Tap the banner or visit rodanandfields.com/Spotify to get your exclusive welcome offer.
Meta AI is the personal AI that's tailored to you, now with its very own app. It's built to get to know you, offering helpful answers and inspiration. Looking for something to add to your bucket list? Meta AI goes beyond traveling the world. It remembers you're a basketball fanatic and suggests you attend one of the playoff games. Just start typing or speaking to get the answers you need, wherever and whenever, because Meta AI is your personal AI. Download the Meta AI app, now available on the Apple App Store and Google Play.
Ah, Smart Water. Pure, crisp taste.
That's really good water.
It's the kind of water that says, I have my life together.
I do feel more sophisticated.
Smart Water. For those with a taste for taste. Grab yours today.
And we're back. So, all right. Again, folks, as we mentioned at the top of today's show, Miles's baseball field, it floated away in this flash flood in Wheeling, which inspired Eric to ask if there were any baseball-related stories we could tell about Universal Studios, and which made me think, because I'm a comedy history buff, made me think of the Naughty 90s, which is an Abbott and Costello movie that Universal Pictures first released to theaters, if you can believe this, 80 years ago today. And when I say today, I mean the date that this podcast goes live, June 20th, 2025. So this film, again, the Naughty 90s, was originally released to theaters at June 20th, 1945. And why this particular Universal picture is so beloved today by comedy fans, because this is the film where, in its entirety, perhaps the most famous routine that Abbott and Costello used to perform as part of their act is captured. And that is, of course, their wildly funny baseball bit, Who's on First? Now, if you're not familiar with the work of Bud Abbott and Lou Costello, and sadly a few people are these days, what you need to know is just before World War II started, and then during much of the war years, there was no act that was hotter in Hollywood. In fact, Eric, Bud and Lou were the top earners of that era, which is interesting because just 5 years previous, the mid 1930s, these two were just journeyman performers on the burlesque circuit. They were making audiences laugh in between appearances by the strippers. And Bud was a straight man, whereas Lou Costello, well, all right, in the earlier part of his life, Louis Christello, that was Lou's real name. He was born in March of 1906 in Paterson, New Jersey. Was an athlete, somewhat famed in the Garden State for his prowess in both basketball and boxing, and with the hope that these athletic skills might somehow translate into a career in silent film. The then 21-year-old Luke Costello. He hitchhikes out to Hollywood, arrives in town 1927, just as the industry is now being thrown into turmoil with the advent of sound films. And no one in town seems all that interested in hiring Costello as an actor. So Lou has to make ends meet by first working as a day laborer at MGM Studios. He helps build sets there. And then by doing extra work over at Roach Studios. In fact, what's interesting is you can see Costello on camera in a crowd scene in a Laurel and Hardy silent comedy called The Battle of the Century. That went out to theaters December 2027. Just interesting in one film, you get to see three comedy legends, Stan Laurel, Oliver Hardy, and then Lou Costello. But, okay, Hollywood, not a welcoming place in 27, so Lou decides to head back home in 1928, but he runs out of funds midway through his journey, and he's now stranded in St. Joseph, Missouri. Where he persuades the owner of a local burlesque theater to give him some stage time, where he works as a dialect comedian. And Costello eventually makes enough money from his burlesque gig in Missouri to finally make it back to Patterson. But now that he's got a taste for performing comedy in front of an audience, Lou, who changes his last name from Costello to Costello because he thought that name might look better on a marquee, he begins working at burlesque houses in and around New Jersey and New York, honing his craft. And all right, Nick, we jump ahead now 6 years. And after 6 years of being in burlesque, Lou's not a star by any stretch of the imagination, but he's at least making a living at the height of the Depression, which is a lot more than most people did back then. But anyway, Costello is a comic who's typically paired with a straight man. And again, these two are doing okay. They're performing at places like Minsky's. But that said, Lou and his partner aren't headlighting. They are strictly middle of the bill performers. One night, 1935, Lou's regular straight man gets sick. And the owner of the theater where Costello and his partner were scheduled to perform that night says, well, look, Bud Abbott's here in town. He's a great straight man, and he knows all the burlesque routines that you typically perform. So why don't you two just team up for one night? And Lou's like, sure. What can it hurt? We'll work with one guy for one night. So Bud Abbott and Lou Costello step out on a burlesque stage together for the very first time. By this point in their respective careers, Eric, Bud and Lou are pros. They know all of the classic comedy routines that performers who work in burlesque did back in the day, including Who's on First. But what happens up on stage that night is magic. These two strangers somehow came together and became this perfectly in sync comedy team, and audiences just ate up Abbott and Costello. And so now things begin happening very, very fast. Bud and Lou formally become a comedy team the following year, 1936. By 37, they're on the top of the bill in burlesque houses all over the country. By 1938, the Kate Smith radio show has hired Bud and Lou to be their new comics in residence. And by the way, it's March 24th, 1938, on a presentation of this nationally broadcast radio show that a large swath of the country hears for the very first time Bud and Lou perform Who's on First. And all people could talk about the next day, those who'd listened to the Kate Smith show on CBS, were these two crazy comedians in their zany baseball bit. Who's on first? What's on second? I don't know. I was on third base. By very next year, 39. Abbott Costello's success in radio has led to them starring in The Streets of Paris, which is the Broadway revue where Bud and Lou performed alongside Latin bombshell Carmen Miranda. And given that people are lining up around the block at New York's Broadhurst Theater to see this comedy team take age-old burlesque routines, and again, like Who's on First, and somehow making them shiny and new, the folks at Universal Pictures decide, let's take a flyer on these clowns. So they hire Abbott Costello to be the comic relief in an Alan Jones movie that the studio will be shooting in the summer of 1940. Now, mind you, it's just a one-picture deal, and that film's title, appropriately enough, is One Night in the tropics, but what happens next literally saves Universal Studios bacon. And I'll get to that part of the story on the second half of today's feature. But first, this.
Imagine this. The best pasta sauce you have ever tasted sits abandoned on a plate. Wasted sauce. That is a tragedy. If only you had used Barilla al Bronzo pasta. Its bronze-cut texture holds your sauce and scoops up every last drop. The Italians call that scarpetta. Capture sauce the Italian way. Barilla al Bronzo. Click or tap the banner to find out more.
Subtle results, still you, but with fewer lines. Botox Cosmetic, out of botulinum toxin A, is a prescription medicine used to temporarily make moderate to severe frown lines, crow's feet, and forehead lines look better in adults.
Effects of Botox Cosmetic may spread hours to weeks after injection, causing serious symptoms. Alert your doctor right away as difficulty swallowing, speaking, breathing, eye problems, or muscle weakness may be a sign of a life-threatening condition. Patients with these conditions before injection are at highest risk. Don't receive Botox Cosmetic if you have a skin infection. Side effects may include allergic reactions, injection site pain, headache, eyebrow and eyelid drooping, and eyelid swelling. Allergic reactions can include rash, welts, asthma symptoms, and dizziness. Tell your doctor about medical history, muscle or nerve conditions including ALS or Lou Gehrig's disease, myasthenia gravis, or Lambert-Eaton syndrome, and medications, including botulinum toxins, as these may increase the risk of serious side effects. For full safety information, visit BotoxCosmetic.com or call 877-351-0300.
See for yourself at BotoxCosmetic.com.
Hey, let's talk about your expense report.
I didn't submit an expense report.
You will. Custom saddles and dog training services are not within policy.
What are you talking about?
SAP Concur uses advanced AI to audit and automatically detect out-of-policy expenses. It's the breakthrough I needed to focus more on our future.
These are my future expenses?
Yes, and self-defense classes are out of policy.
I'll need self-defense classes?
You will.
For what?
It's a big dog.
SAP Concur helps your business move forward faster. Learn more at concur.com.
And we're back. All right, back to the story of Abbott and Costello and who's on first, folks. And I have to tell you, I'm pretty sure that this part of today's story, our friends over at Comcast, the corporation that serves as the parent company of NBC Universal, they probably aren't going to like that I'm about to shine a spotlight on this particular part of Universal Studios history. Because there was a time in the late 1930s, early 1940s, when this fabled film studio, which again started by Carl Laemmle back in June of 1912, was teetering on the brink of bankruptcy. A string of expensive flops, key among them a big screen version of the Broadway musical Showboat, had forced Universal to regroup, to go from producing big budget prestige pictures to, well, low-budget westerns and melodramas. And it's around this time that Abbott and Costello show up on the Universal lot for, again, let's remember, one picture deal. They're here to shoot One Night in the Tropics, and it was shot fast. Eric went before the cameras in August 26, 1940. Just 5 weeks later, on September 30th of that same year, 1940, it's in a can. 6 weeks later, it's out in theaters, November 15th, 1940. But the interesting thing is the studio had done some early test screenings, and audiences had responded so strongly to Abbott and Costello's comedy routines, which had been dropped in here and there, and again in this Alan Jones musical, that Universal executives were like, all right, let's get these guys under contract for a follow-up film. But better yet, 2 follow-up films. So, October 1940, Universal signs Abbott and Costello to a 2-picture deal. And Lou had a condition. You know, he would only sign the contract if they agreed that the world premiere of One Night in the Tropics would be held in his hometown, Paterson, New Jersey.
That's just an odd thing to lay your foot in the sand saying you have to do it in Paterson, New Jersey. But sure enough, hometown guy.
Think back on the story we shared. 21 years old, goes out to Hollywood, 1927, has to return home with his tail between his legs. And so Lou was like, look, I told the people in my hometown I'd be a movie star someday. And now it's actually actually happen. So just in case this movie bombs and I never get in front of a camera ever again, I want to be sure that the people in Paterson, New Jersey get to see this movie. And executives of Universal are like, yeah, sure, whatever. We just need you on set, Costello, shooting your next movie for our studio by December this year. So sure enough, One Night in the Tropics has its world premiere at the Fabian Theater in Paterson, New Jersey, October 30th, 1940. 6 weeks later, Abbott Costello in front of the camera shooting Buck Privates, which is their first starring vehicle. Eric, this thing arrives in theaters just 20 days after shooting is completed. All right. January 31st, 1941. And Buck Privates, it's a smash hit. It cost Universal less than $240,000 to produce. It goes on to sell $4 million worth of tickets in North America alone. Crazy part is Buck Privates isn't even released to theaters when Universal tells Bud Luke, back to work. We need your second movie. That one would eventually be called Hold That Ghost. It goes before the cameras January 21st of 1941. And then right after that, as part of the brand new multi-picture deal that Abbott Costello signed with Universal while they're still shooting Hold That Ghost, Bud and Lou begin working on a second service-themed comedy in the Navy. Goes before cameras April 8th, 1941. Is out in theaters May 30th of that same year. So this is bang, bang, bang. Basically shot back-to-back 3 feature-length movies starring Abbott and Costello that are then rushed into theaters that then go on to do tremendous business. And
Jim, I know people that take longer to release YouTube videos than what they're doing for those movies right now.
You're not wrong. In fact, there are half-hour-long television shows today that have longer production schedules than any of these feature-length comedies that Abbott Costello ground out for Universal during the first year they were under contract to that studio. And by the time that year, again, 1941 was done, Bud and Lou had not only shot 2 more of these sorts of films. There was Ride 'em Cowboy, which went before the cameras June 30th of that same year. Keep 'em Flying, that's an Air Force themed comedy, went before the cameras September 5th. But then Universal turns around and loans Abbott and Costello out to MGM so that they can make a comedy for that studio. And Rio Rita, that goes before the cameras November 10th of 1941 and wouldn't finish production till January of 1942. They did things slower at MGM.
Right. They let him eat lunch.
There we go. That's right. And every single one of these movies makes money for Universal, a lot of money. There are longtime employees at the studio who will flat out tell you, we were teetering at the edge of bankruptcy, but Bud Abbott and Lou Costello saved us. And if it weren't for all those quickie comedies that they made for Universal back in the early 1940s, I don't know if this studio would have survived World War II. Now, one of the main reasons that Abbott and Costello were able to churn out all of these comedies for Universal so quickly, and to put this in perspective, in the 16 years Bud and Lou were under contract, they made 28 full-length movies for that studio. And that pair probably would have done more movies for Universal if Costello hadn't come down with rheumatic fever at the very height of their fame. Eric, this happened March of 43. Bud and Lou have just toured the country on a campaign to sell war bonds. By the way, all on their own. They sell $85 million worth of these things. In 2025 dollars, that's $1.5 billion adjusted for inflation. But anyway, Lou gets rheumatic fever right after he and Bud wrap up their war bond tour, and it takes Costello a full 6 months of bed rest to recover from this illness. And for what I've been told, executives at Universal at the time were basically tearing their hair out the entire time that Lou's at home convalescing, because it's like all they can think about is, oh my God, all of the money we're not making.
No. That's like 3 or 4 movies he could have got done.
That's it exactly. 6 months. Ooh, 3 movies easy. Anyway, a couple of quick notes here before we wrap up today's feature. I'm told that Lou Costello especially enjoyed walking onto the MGM lot the very first day that they shot Rio Rita. In fact, Lou supposedly wouldn't get started till he walked the production team around the lot, where he'd then point out where, as a day laborer, I helped build that building and I helped build that set and that sort of thing. Also, I should mention that one of the reasons that Universal was able to crank out all of these early Abbott and Costello comedies so quickly is that the scripts of these films would typically incorporate one of Bud and Lou's tried and true burlesque routines, which now brings us to the Naughty 90s, which is this period comedy that Abbott and Costello shot for Universal back in January of 1945, and which the studio sends out into theaters, as I mentioned earlier on in today's show, 80 years ago today, the day this podcast goes live online, June 20th. So again, we're talking June 20th, 1945. And one of the reasons that you want to watch the Naughty 90s today is that you get to see Abbott and Costello perform their classic routine, Who's on First, live in front of cameras, where Bud and Lou mine every single laugh they can find in that routine. And I also have to say, me personally, one of the other reasons I enjoy watching the Naughty 90s is that the showboat in this movie, where a lot of the scenes are shot, very same showboat that Carl Laemmle had built at Universal for the movie version of Showboat, the movie that almost bankrupted Universal Studios in the late 30s. Again, prior to Bud and Lou showing up and then cranking out all those cheap-to-make, high-grossing comedies. Now, we've mentioned repeatedly in today's show, Paterson, New Jersey, and Lou Costello never forgot his hometown. Costello was very generous with all of the money he made out in Hollywood, regularly sending big checks back to the Garden State, which were then used to construct, the Lou Costello Municipal Pool and the Lou Costello Jr. Youth Center. And sadly, we lost Lou back in March of 1959. He was just 3 days shy of his 53rd birthday. And it's been said that it was that bout of rheumatic fever that he caught back in March of 43 that damaged Costello's heart. He was felled by a fatal heart attack. Make of that what you will. But the folks at Paterson, they never forgot this funny little fat man, that local boy who made good, which is why back in 1992, they erected a statue of Lou Costello in Ellison Park. And this statue, it has Costello in a bowler hat, carrying a baseball bat as if he's about to launch into a performance of Who's on First. And what I especially love about this statue, which was sculpted by Deidre Zarkevich, is its title, which is Lou's on First. And by the way, Eric, I don't know if you know this about Nancy, my wife. She's a Jersey girl. So during a recent trip to the Garden State, we actually made a special side trip to Paterson, New Jersey, where we stopped by Lou Costello Park. I guess that's what they renamed Ellison Park, to check out Deidre's Lou's on First statue. And it's a really great likeness. Anyway, in honor of Miles's baseball game literally being rained out this past weekend by the flash flood, that's the story of Abbott and Costello and Who's on First, which, by the way, you can catch the version of that classic burlesque routine, the one that Bud and Lou shot for Universal's Naughty 90s, over on YouTube right now. In fact, it's on the official Universal Pictures YouTube channel. Just type in the Naughty 90s, Who's on First, and it's right there, folks.
Right. I watched it, Jim, right before we recorded when you said, hey, this is what we're going. And I had a funny tie-in that you don't know, that my son Hunter performed Who's on First at the high school variety show just last year, playing Costello flawlessly. And that is the first time I actually ever have. I've never saw the full routine. Now I feel like I've seen like Looney Tune characters, Bugs Bunny and stuff, play it off. And so I very much knew what Who's on First was. But the first time I actually saw the full routine was my son and a buddy of his flawlessly pulling it off. And it was a proud, we're normally, I'm very a proud dad when Miles hits a home run or whatever. But like the theater kid Hunter pulling it off, I was more proud of that moment than anything.
All right. So I have to ask the end gag, who was the shortstop? Was it I don't care, I don't give a darn, I don't give a damn? Which one was it?
Oh man, I feel like it was a PG show. I don't remember them throwing a curse word out there, so maybe they PG'd it up for darn. But I'll have to watch back on the video recording. I illegally recorded on my phone.
Because that's what's so funny about it. Again, these are two guys who came out of burlesque. And depending on what town they were in and what the blue laws were, they could either clean up the show or go dirty. So that they had three different endings depending on, all right, what can we say here? Oh, this is a I don't give a darn town. All right, we got it. So,
love it.
That's so cool.
No, this was great. Thanks, Jim, for putting this together. It was a baseball story. It made will make both of my sons happy. So well, very excited.
Glad to do it. And again, hope that they repaired the damage on Miles's field soon, and he get back to his own field of dreams soon.
Yeah, there we go.
All right, well, folks, that brings us to the end of this week's edition of the Epic Universal Podcast. And but again, folks, as always, Eric and I love hearing from you. We love hearing your suggestions about things we should cover or stories you want us to tell here. So if you want to reach out, well, Eric, how can the nice folks get a hold of you?
Yeah, Jim, you can find me at Eric Hersey on most social platforms. And I do actually have some listener questions and comments that we'll probably get to maybe in the next show. So keep sending them over at Eric Hersey. Jim, where can people reach you at?
Well, as always, you can find me on X and Instagram at Jim Hill Media, and then over on Facebook at Jim Hill Media News. And that's going to wrap things up for today, folks. But be sure and come back next week for the Epic Universal Podcast, where we've got a special guest that I think you're really going to enjoy. But for now, thanks for listening. And on behalf of Mr. Hersey, stick around and find out what's coming up later this month over on the Jim Hill Media Podcast Network. Thanks for listening to today's episode, and if you like what you heard, head on over to Apple Podcasts and give us a review. This really helps get the word out about our shows. We also have some other shows on the network that you might like. Each week, we drop a brand new Disney dish with Len Testa. For animation and movie news, please listen to Fine Tuning with Drew Taylor. By the way, you can also check out Drew's other podcasts, like The Fuse, the official Mission Impossible podcast, which he does with Charles Hood. For all things Lucasfilm, why don't you subscribe to Looking at Lucasfilm with Brian Gahn? Likewise, we have I Want That Too with the lovely Lauren Hersey, our weekly podcast that features the latest merch and the stories behind that merch. And our Epic Universal Podcast takes a look at the Universal theme park. So please join Eric Hersey and I on that weekly. If you enjoy theme park history, we also host Manufacturing the Magic with Shelley and Noah Valladolid. That podcast tells the story of how we got the modern theme parks that we enjoy today. Join myself, Len Testa, and veteran Imagineer Jim Schul for our latest season of Disney Unpacked, our first ever video series exclusively for Patreon. These get released first Sunday of every month, and each month we release several exclusive podcasts to help support this video series. I want to thank everyone that supports the Jim Hill Media Network. For more information about podcasts and content, head on over to jimhillmedia.com. So that's going to do it for now, folks. Thanks again for listening, and we will catch up on the next show.